All right, since it's 7:35 and the bulk of the front part of the agenda does not require uh quorum, I hereby call this meeting to order at 7:35. We will be doing attendance. Sam Hendricks, not here. Taylor Nguyen, not here. Jack McDermott, not here. Vahit Nanduri, not here. Sanvi Arora. Sanvi. Yeah, she texted present in the chat. Holton Hodges,
Here.
thank you. Senator Schneider, not here. Senator Foxworth, not here, and I am here. We have not achieved quorum, but we'll wait for the others to come before doing any of the legislation. Hopefully they show up. Oh, because of that, I'm going to move that we postpone the adoption of the minutes until next meeting without objection. Next is the public comment period. Is there anybody here that wishes to give public comment? There will be a separate stipend review testimony period after this. Sorry. Can people hear me all right? Oh, strange. All right, those wishing to give public comment. I see Gabriella.
Yes, hello. Should I speak it now?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I'm Gabriella, and I'm a junior here at UNC studying psychology and math. And I'm also an undergraduate researcher at the Center of Excellence for Eating Disorders, located at the UNC Hospital. I've been working on the proposal to remove the display of calories in exchange for a more comprehensive alternative for almost a year now, with the professional guidance from Dr. Bulick, who's the founding director of the Center of Excellence for Eating Disorders. We've compiled the research and analyzed the literature on the matter to ensure the proposal is backed by science and would be beneficial for the student body as a whole. So I'm very grateful to Senator Wilcox for helping solidify a resolution and bringing the matter to the undergraduate Senate, as it is one that's really important to me and has yielded some pretty positive responses from several others. So with that, I look forward to observing on the discussion, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Chair McClanahan, you are recognized.
Thank you. Honorable Senators of the Oversight and Advocacy Committee, I address you tonight to speak in favor of USR 105-133, a resolution to encourage the Chancellor to accommodate hidden disabilities. This resolution speaks to the pivotal issue of accommodations on this campus, both recognizing steps the administration has taken to address these issues on campus and calling upon the administration to take further steps to address this issue in a constructive and positive manner. While I'm aware of points raised last meeting claiming the resolution did not provide sufficient detail, the resolution makes reference to specific support systems that request the university to develop and maintain, which include awareness campaigns, training programs, flexible accommodations, equitable access to medical health and mental health resources, and to ensure that academic resources, support services, and campus facilities are designed to be accessible to students with hidden disabilities. As such, I would call upon the committee to look favorably on it and further the commitment of the undergraduate student government to an inclusive and supportive campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClanahan. Are there any other requests for public comment? Seeing none, we will move into the stipend review testimony period. Those invited to give testimony in regards to stipends for fiscal year 2024-2025, the next term, are welcome to speak under the undergraduate code. Just raise your hands on here and I'll try to do this orderly. President Everett, you're recognized.
Yeah, thanks so much. Please forgive me. I'm like walking to my car on crutches right now, so it's a little hard. But it's great to see you all. I think I just really wanted to speak up in favor of how important stipends are. I think generally speaking, historically, of course, having, I would say, a pretty strong history in terms of stipending student leaders. But especially, I mean, the roles that we all are in are very, very demanding, especially when they serve such large university functions as well. So just really wanting to really, really reemphasize how important it is, at least to me and to many others, to protect our stipend process. Whew. So I think what else I need to say. Yeah, I just really do believe that these roles again can be very, very extensive and expansive, and even based off of our stipends compared to other universities within our system, we are still at the lowest of them. I mean, there's the A&T president and some other folks get paid, I would argue, substantially more than we do. So just again, really, really, really important to ensure that we're equitably allocating funds towards the leaders who are often keeping the boat going at all of our universities and system. So yeah, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Vice President Siegel.
Thank you, Chair Pollock. I'm dog sitting for my friend right now, so apologies if there's some background noise. Let me see if I can get Iggy. Oh, this is Iggy, and he's at my house for the first time, so there's a little bit of background noise. I just want to echo everything that President Everett said. I think one thing that's really important is for a lot of students who are in these executive positions, they are often foregoing the opportunity to seek other forms of employment during the academic year. And I think that's an important thing to recognize during the during the stipend review period, that there are a lot of students who do want to seek additional sources of income during the academic year who choose not to in order to continue serving the student body. I also know, I don't know if this is part of what ONA is considering, but there have been discussions regarding university sanctioned responsibilities, those being the jobs and the different responsibilities that carry out a specific duty of the university as sanctioned by the university. So an example of that would be hardship parking and carrying out the external appointments, I think is a better example. I don't believe that that should be the only qualifier for a stipend. I think it's an important thing to acknowledge, but not every single one of our executive board members are necessarily carrying out university sanctioned functions. So I would just like to encourage the committee to recognize that fact, to understand that even in the fine print, it might not say this is a university sanctioned function. But in practice, I would argue that a lot of these folks are doing work that is pretty pivotal to making sure that the work of student government gets done. And then the last thing I want to say is, Speaker Gary, my office looks awesome right now. So good to see that you're using it. But that's it. Thanks y'all for your work and your effort in getting this process done. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Next is Christopher Williams.
Yes, I didn't prepare anything, but I want to speak more so to what Vice President Siegel and President Everett sort of spoke about regarding those positions that might not necessarily define as university functioning. And I think that's really where, for example, my position really falls pretty heavily into. There's a lot that I do to support the president. But in addition to that, one of my sole jobs is working with what I guess is defined as the committees, but the committees being the cabinet departments. So that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, campus life student experiences, student wellness and safety, academic affairs, all that good stuff. And so that's a team of 12 co-directors, and then usually each co-director has roughly 7 to 15 general staff members. All of that sort of under my purview. And so the events that are put on that you see happening for executive branch to implement the policy goals of the student body president that was elected is a pretty sizable thing. Booking rooms and getting assistance in booking rooms, and figuring out how to connect certain individuals to certain administrative bodies and institutions on campus so that there is the most successful event or successful policy transaction that we're pushing for is very important. And one prime example that I'm thinking about is with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and working with the dean of students on a new framework around how the university mourns or deals with the loss of life with students, faculty, and staff. That's been something that's been ongoing, that is pretty big, and goes to sort of like a lot of the policy platforms that were found in the Everett administration. Another thing being like pushing for this new financial wellness center, and hiring a director, and all of these things that aren't necessarily defined as university functioning, but it helps make the student experience better, and allows us to best advocate for the student body and the needs of the student body in the executive branch. And so when I hear criteria about trying to base stipends mostly on something, and I might be understanding this wrong, and if I am, I mean, if there's a time to like for questions, that's great, but if we're basing it solely on university functions, that's very challenging, because then it limits, I think, the effectiveness of an administration and a student body president who comes in with all of this energy and all of these goals that the students voted for. But there needs to be a team behind it. That's sort of where I fall. How do I help in building the most productive team? How do I show up for those who join the branch, so that they are ready to do the work? It's culture and care, and it is also policy implementation. It's a bunch of different things, and so I think that this for me has been it's been a fun role. It's been very fun, but it's been very time consuming. I think that, and many individuals can speak to my work ethic in this regard, whether it be Speaker Gary or Vice President Siegel, President Everett, or Logan Grosky. It like something like Chief of Staff, though not university functioning in the way that it would be defined, is a very, very time consuming task that deserves to be considered just as much as something that is defined as university functioning, a university functioning position being carried out. And to that point, I don't think I have anything else to say right now. And if I do, I guess I can just get in contact with the ONA chair or something of that nature. But if there's a point to ask questions, I'm happy to answer questions. I see there's other hands that are up though, so I am going to stop talking for the time being, and yield some time to someone else, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll ask at the end, once everybody's had a chance to speak, if the committee wants to ask anybody specific questions. But I believe next is Andrew Gary.
Yes, thank you to the committee for providing us with this time to provide some additional testimony. I have a few thoughts that I'll share. One directly related to whether or not my position deserves a stipend, which is what I believe that we were asked to testify on, and two, some broader thoughts on stipends in general. I think my position deserves a stipend. I do a lot of work. And most of it is related to making sure the university functions of Senate get done. Frankly, I'll be honest, I have to deal a lot with like Andrew Forbes and Logan Grodsky, and I think that should result in my stipend being tripled in. Now, some broader thoughts. Stipends have been a perennial issue since my time in Senate. When I first joined in the 103rd, there were discussions about giving cabinet directors stipends, which resulted in a political quagmire because the Senate said, if you're going to stipend cabinet directors, you have to stipend committee chairs, and yada, yada, yada. These cycles go on endlessly. Like theoretically, anyone in student government could claim they do a ton of work and deserve a stipend, but we don't have the budget for that. A bigger point that I want to make is the fee that funds our stipends is not meant for stipends. It is meant to fund student organizations principally. Giving out stipends is something we do as is not something that is required. And I would honestly entertain arguments that it is actually explicitly against the purpose of the fee. But I do think stipends are valuable. The positions that have traditionally been stipended do a lot of work, and they do work on behalf of the university, whether it be hardship parking, appointing individuals to university boards and commissions, overseeing the finance process, or any of the other delegated authorities that we have been granted by the chancellor and the board of trustees. And that deserves some compensation because I don't want to do free labor for this university. However, there is a limited budget. We cannot stipend everyone, and we certainly cannot stipend anyone at a rate that approaches a reasonable salary. It's just not possible. We could maybe do that for one person, like exactly one position. So we're going to have to make hard choices about who gets a stipend and how much their stipends are. The decisions that were made in the 100th and 101st Senate were to spread stipends out among a bunch of positions, which meant that essentially most positions got paid very little for the work they did. And that was the choice that was made then. I think going forward, we should think critically about the positions that receive a stipend and why they receive a stipend. The idea that stipends are meant to fairly compensate for work is kind of not a viable like framework for analysis. It just isn't going to work. It's not going to produce an outcome to where like you can even like a fairly measure that. Like I as a speaker have done magnitudes more than my predecessor just because I have chosen to do more parts of my job and to like go beyond what is required. I think that can be said for many of the people on the call today. So like the value that we choose to base a stipends on should not be tied to amount of work done. It should be tied to, I think, something that we can reasonably define. I think that tying it to the idea of university function makes sense because there are clear in writing things that are delegated authorities and university functions. The university has told us what they are. I think that it makes sense to say that stipends are meant to essentially offset the opportunity cost that you get because you can't get a part-time job. That is a fair thing to say. But I think it is also unreasonable to expect that anyone's stipend is going to approach what you would be paid in a part-time job. We just don't have that money. And it's not worth trying to even think about it like that. So I think as the Oversight and Advocacy Committee moves through this process, it's going to have to make a lot of hard choices. And I don't think anyone's going to be particularly satisfied with any of them. But let's try and avoid a situation where executive branch says we want all of these positions stipend, which results in the Senate and honor system saying, well, if they get these positions stipend, then we have to have our position stipend too. Because that's going to result in deadlock and then no one gets a stipend. Or actually, no, Logan gets to decide who gets stipended if we have a deadlock. And I think we can all agree we would prefer if Logan does not decide who gets paid next year. So I think I'll
to that.
And turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Gary. I would also like to point out that the amount of money in the stipends budget is also less than last year. That's also something to keep in mind, that we just don't have the funding due to the percentage calculations of the stipends budget. But Michelle, I believe you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Michelle Liu. Some of you guys might know me. That's because for the honor system, usually it's Lawazzie and Matthew who take on the Senate representations. But hey, I'm Michelle. I am a Deputy Student Attorney General of the honor system. And I believe that, you know, the honor system, we do a lot for university functions. At most universities, student conduct is a administration-led process. For example, at NC State, if you look at their student conduct office, they have more than double the staff of UNC's student conduct office. And that's because a lot of the work in student conduct is done by the honor system. Nationwide, UNC's honor system is one of 2 student-led systems. So we're definitely doing university functions, and we do a lot of good work for this university. I know that at Senate meetings, Matthew gives you updates of the backlog, and I'll give you kind of like a broader idea of what the honor system has done. In the current administration, we've resolved 152 cases, and currently 45 cases are currently within this process. Last semester alone, I worked 126.5 hours, and that's just for formal meetings and scheduled tasks. It's not including when like I get impromptu like called onto a case and I have to resolve something. For example, just last Monday, a case manager texted me and asked me to kind of comment in on a case to help them diffuse a situation. I thought that this would take 15 minutes max. It did not. It took us 4 hours to respond to that situation. So this shows that, you know, student government does a lot, and I think that the stipends should reflect this. And kind of going off of what was said earlier by Becca, I think that student government, it's to represent and to promote student voices. And thus, student government needs to represent a diverse group of students. By working in student government, people aren't able to have part-time jobs. And this means that low-income students can't participate in student government. If they can't be in student government, their voices are not represented in student government. And this leads to a rather paternalistic system of governance. Student government, like student governance, at UNC, we say that it's for self-governance. But if our executive, judicial, and legislative branches aren't representative of what the student body actually is, then we're not serving the public anymore. And I understand that, it's not feasible to pay anybody at the same rate as a part-time job. And that's true. I do know that there is more demand than supply. But at the end of the day, I still feel like these stipends should ensure that student government is representative of the university body and is really channeling those student voices. And that ends my spiel right there. I do need to leave just because the honor system is currently having a meeting right now, but it's nice meeting all of y'all. Bye.
Thank you so much. I believe next is Miriam Khan, SEA Director.
I actually put my hand down and then I would just want to speak after Logan because yeah. Thank you.
Logan Gronsky.
No, I mean, like, I just put my hand down and then put it back up because I wanted to get back in the queue because I was drinking my soda and then it fell on me. So.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Then I believe next speaker would be Logan.
Hi, all. Yeah. My official position is that there should be no stipends provided to student government officials whatsoever. I have for the last 2 years that I've received a stipend, donated the entirety of it to charity. I don't think that we should receive these stipends. I believe it is a perverted use of the student organizations fee. There are a lot of students in a lot of places who do a lot of things without compensation and without defrayment of an opportunity cost. And they do it for experience and the love of the game. And that is how the world works. That being said, my position here is very unpopular. I will also say the treasurer objectively performs a wide variety of university functions in addition to there are basically two things the treasurer does. One is that they attend to the oversight and administration and ultimately the execution of the student organizations fee allocation. And then additionally, they serve on university boards related to the review of tuition and fees. These are the whole cosmos of what the treasurer does. There is no doubt in my mind that the treasurer is principally responsible for university functions. More broadly, and in terms of how I, as an advisor to the Undergraduate Senate, would say that the Undergraduate Senate should approach this, the speaker is very correct. There is not enough money to give everyone a fair stipend. There's certainly not enough money to fix it to the amount of work they do, even if you could ever barely measure how much work an office does. It is so variable. Most of the time throughout most of the history of student government officers don't really do their jobs or don't do them well. And I actually think this is like we're like the best we've ever been, or at least the best we've been in some time. So that's good. But it probably won't be that way forever. So like fixing it to the amount of work they do is not really functional. I will be responsible should the Senate default on introducing its own stipends act. I will be responsible for determining the rates at which the Senate may pass a continuing resolution. It will be my intention to go down the list of what is current of officials who are currently stipended in the undergraduate code, determine who principally perform university functions, I will adhere to objective indicia there, principally the existing USO memorandum. And I will propose the existing rates in the code, if that is what it comes to. I would recommend we not do that. I think that would be silly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I believe next on my list is Christopher Ever again, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you so much. I just really wanted to quickly chime in and just reiterate everything that everyone said, specifically Vice President Siegel and Chief of Staff Williams. I'm just very concerned in using such a measure and a metric as university functions can be very, very ambiguous, because in many ways, a lot of us won't ever see the work that the other person does, which I think, so that makes it very, very difficult to have a conversation about what's equitable in terms of stipending. I think, to be very, very clear, I also understand and totally agree that these stipends will not be in any way close to a livable wage. But I think if we're going to talk about at least equity in the way that I view it, I mean, we can look at the system. There's ECU, them in and of themselves. I mean, the president makes $850 and the vice president makes $750. I'm not saying we need to do that in any way. What I am saying is, across the system, there seems to be a constant understanding that these stipends are important, not to. And I think some language that I've been hearing, which I think my concern is, there seems to be some lacking transparency. There seems to be some language about stipends being about quote unquote loyalty, which I don't think that is fair at all. I think in many ways, there are a lot of folks who take up these positions, one, that can't work, who really do really need the money. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I've had to work since my freshman year, even in student government, even in this role now. I mean, I'm doing an additional 25 hours a week just for my own internship to cover my rent and my living expenses, because I mean, I don't come from funds and or additional financial, shoot, I dropped a drink, financial feasibility for things. So I think that in many ways, just wanting to be very, very clear about the language we're using with stipends, because I do think that, again, they're very, very important to allow students to really do their roles and do their roles effectively. So if that's about having a clear conversation about what metrics will allow us to effectively gauge stipends, and that's amazing. I fully trust the discretion of the O&A committee and all of the chair people and everyone involved. But I do just want to say how again, really, really important it is. And I hope that this conversation doesn't come into a dialogue around competitiveness. I would hate for there to be anything about competitiveness regarding either of the branches, either three of ours. But I do think, again, it's just really, really important. I think all of our functions, again, are so important to make sure that our university can continue functioning in the way that it does. And I just really would love to further engage with these conversations. I mean, if anyone has questions about my role and what I do, or just anyone else, I'd be happy to connect you all or support. Because I do think at the end of the day, these roles, specifically the executive roles and honor court, and even the Senate roles, are just so important. So I really appreciate the way in which the system is looking now in terms of who's getting stipended. But I mean, I'm happy to have conversations about amounts. But I do think, again, it's important that the general roles that have been stipended remain. So thank you. Okay, I'm done talking. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next on my list is Miriam. Are you good now?
Yes, I'm good. It was a sticky situation, to say the least. I am a little nervous, to be honest. Like, I can turn my camera on. As a woman of color, like, I'm just gonna be completely honest, like, historically, like, when decisions are made by those that may not represent us, we do not always feel comfortable. So I just want to, before I start speaking, I just want to go ahead and make that clear. Because I don't want to be that girl right now that's, shaking and perhaps isn't being listened to because she's doing so. And I want to make it clear, like, that is just because of, like, historically and institutionally. And we all know this. We go to UNC Chapel Hill, we study this, we know this, and it's a very real thing. So before I start speaking, I just want to say that. So, I don't, when I stumble on my words, nobody's, behind the camera making fun of me. I just wanted to say, after a lot of conversations that I've had over the weekend and with federal affairs, I'm here to talk about specifically my role as the Director of State and External Affairs. From what I have found out, it has been told to me that a lot of, this idea of, like, university sanctioned functions, there are a couple of things that I wanted to say, specifically particular to my role as Director of State and External Affairs as well. One being, and I spoke with Andrew about this, the current document that, sanctions what university sanctioned jobs are, that's a document that was signed in 2020, and we have changed the code so many times since then. My concern would be, how can we execute, a stipend cut on that basis without acknowledging that the code has been changed? How can we know that it's not, purposeful in any ways? And, again, like, as state and external affairs director, many have said that perhaps I am simply like a representative of students. And my question there is like, and I want to say why that's not true, because if I was just a representative of students, why has my role put me in a position where I'm making decisions that strictly affect students and the Chapel Hill community, and specifically where students are and stand, and where the university stands within the Chapel Hill community. My work, and I've had conversations with federal affairs as well, which works with the university when, federal affairs is going through talking to the chancellor, talking to the vice chancellor, and the federal affairs, they have a question, or they have to, have someone be in a room where decisions are being made, not representation is taking place. Decisions are being made. And again, like as a woman of color, like if I'm simply going to say, oh, my role boils just down to me being a representative, I'm not just the brown girl in the room. I'm a person in the room that is actually representing, not just representing students, but talking about what decisions we need to make as students for the university to be able to be in this Chapel Hill community. And Andrew, Speaker Andrew Gary, my dog himself, he said, we can't stipend everyone at a rate that is a salary. He said, maybe we could, if we put all our money together, we could do one person, and that stipends have been given to those who historically have, conducted work for the university. And, how can we, and other people have talked about, like this idea of like not, being able to get an actual job. It is a requirement in my role that I go to specific meetings, and I have specific places that I cannot decide when I'm going to be meeting with like groups that work with the university, or groups that are part of the university, like the CCC, or other groups like, like when I'm meeting with Aaron Bockenheimer, when I'm meeting with Fran Muse, like, or when I'm as a director, when I have met with the Federal Affairs Office multiple times, Roxana Kiesler will text me a question, not because she wants to know, oh, what do students think, but she wants to know, what is the student government doing? And as the director of state and external affairs, it is my job to represent the student government, or represent the executive branch in that role. And as the executive branch being, a university group, and the executive branch themselves being able to be called upon as a whole by the chancellor, if that's what the document says, that is what the document says, then I mean, like, and I think like at the end of the day, like, I also just wanted to add in that there have been, I'm unable to, again, I've said, I'm unable to get an actual job because I'm required to be at physical meetings for my role. And there have been rooms that I have been present in, and to just echo the sentiment that Michelle was saying, I am unable, I am the lowest paid member of the executive branch. I am not complaining. I am not complaining. But unlike Treasurer Grodsky, I have asked you multiple times. You hugged me. You told me you weren't going to talk about me behind my back. But I have asked multiple times. I have said, I have been able to I cannot use my $1,600 that I get for anything actual physical, but I still need $1,600, in a sense that if it's not $1,600, if it's $500, regardless, any penny that I get is extremely, extremely important, because as a student, as an out-of-state student, I'm unable to compensate myself. I'm unable to donate the money that I get. I am not in a financial position to be able to do that. And again, as a woman of color, to be able to be on the executive board, to be able to have a stipend, and the director before me, Raina Young, like for Raina to be as a woman of color in the role, for her to be in decisions where representation matters, that is extremely important. However, if this stipend was not given to me, I know someone's going to be like, oh, she said given, but if this stipend was not there, if this stipend was not in the undergraduate code, would this perhaps be a position that I could take on? Probably not. But then if it wasn't me, then who would be in this role? Somebody that would be able to do that without that backing, even if it is $1, if it is $10, then I can, buy some bread, like at the end of the day, $10 is what? Like now these days is $3.69, that's 3 gallons of gas, right? That's a lot. I drive a Jetta. That's a lot. Great MPG if you guys are trying to get a new car. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is, if it wasn't me, it wouldn't be me, the rural Virginia Desi Muslim girl that grew up going to PWIs. It wouldn't be me. And I don't want to say it would be someone that has been more supported by the institution that we know as, the empire, but I think it would be. So that's all I wanted to say. And I do want to, again, Max, thank you so much for speaking with me last week, and also making sure that I got my Google form done, because I would not have done it had you not reminded me. So thank you. And thank you for listening to me, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Andrew Forbes, I believe you're next.
Yes. Hello, everyone. As you know, I am Andrew Forbes. I am the chair of the Senate's Finance Committee. Just last night, we wrapped up the spring 2024 budgetary cycle, appropriating out just about $415,000. So the one university function that is delegated to the Senate. So in that sense, I believe that this position and whoever is to come after me certainly deserves compensation within the bounds that are set there. I do additionally want to provide some more like concrete context on some of the things we're talking about. I know it's been mentioned by a few different people that we're working with less money. And in concrete terms, for the fiscal year 2024, so everyone who currently receives a stipend, they receive or a total amount of $51,355 is being used for that. And this year should be roughly $47,000. So that is $4,000 less than what we're dealing with this year. Depending on who you look at, that could be anywhere from a person and a half to 2 or 3 people. So things certainly clearly will have to change there. Additionally, on this talk of university function versus the work that people do and the importance of that work to student government and its function outside of the proper delegated authority, I do want to cite to the undergraduate code by which we are bound to appropriate these stipends and do all of this work in like setting aside money for them. It would be 6 USGC section 311, the stipends one, lines K and L. K is the appropriation of funds to stipends shall be consistent with the sole funding criterion of vitality to university functions. Vitality to university functions is the extent to which the performance of that officer's duty is necessary for the completion of a delegated authority of the undergraduate student government or other necessary official university function. And then L, the provision of stipends shall not be related to the number of hours of work completed by an officer. So these two lines within the code set the boundaries by which we can appropriate money for stipends. I believe with good reason, as we've mentioned at length on the term of hours, we just don't have enough money to give everyone the money for which they work. And then university function, since there are very many people in student government who do very many very important jobs, the ability for us to stipend all of them is just not possible. So setting the bounds at this vitality to university function sets an objective standard by which we can rein that in and determine who can receive stipends and by how much. As I've said, there are absolutely very many people who perform quite a lot of very important jobs for the student government, but it is within these bounds that we are to appropriate money for stipends, and that does mean that hard cuts will have to be made. And if a job does not fall within the USO memo that was shared earlier in the chat by Speaker Gary, then those individuals will not be eligible for stipends. I know that this is certainly not as whoever succeeds, all of us would appreciate if they're people who do not perform university functions, but these are the standards by which we have set that are objective and will help us provide a fair standard by which to appropriate the next stipends. That's all I have though, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair Forbes. Oliver, you are recognized.
Hi, give me 1 second. I was just driving. I'm getting back to my apartment. For those of you who don't know me, I was the O&A chair for the past 2 years. And I'm pretty familiar with the stipend review process. And so I thought I'd give my 2 cents on what I've learned essentially over the past 2 years. Okay, so I understand kind of where Treasurer Grodzki is coming from when he says that like there's lots of people that do a lot of work in college in general for student organizations, that type of thing. And like I kind of see where he's coming from, but it is true that there's a lot of very, very important and very, very necessary tasks that are done by members of student government. For example, the honor court, like that kind of work is just not going to be done without students. And like, it's just in that sense, it's very different from me saying like donating like hours and hours of my time to like a dance team or something. It's like not the same as donating hours and hours of time to a literal like function of the university that has to get done at some point, and it's crucial. So I don't necessarily agree with that comparison that like everyone just kind of does work, and that's just how it is. I do think sorry, let me gather my thoughts a little bit. In my 2 years of reviewing stipends, I've gained a lot of like knowledge about what each of the positions in student government kind of does. And I think I stand firm in my opinion that although you can't stipend everyone, obviously, like a living wage or a part-time, enough to suffice for a part-time job, it is better than nothing. I've seen the numbers, like I know how much people do get paid, and I know that it's not enough. But like Miriam was saying, like that $1,600 or that however much that amount of money is, maybe it's not enough for a part-time job, but it helps with something, you know. And I think that cutting back on those types of on those expenses is not worth it in order to like consolidate that number to a smaller number of individuals. I think it's worth it to spread that out a little bit more in order to better compensate individuals in all branches of student government. And I did have a question of which positions exactly were the ones that would have their funding cut given this proposal?
There's not been any official proposals yet, or unofficial to my knowledge, so I don't know.
Okay. Does anyone have an approximation, like which positions would have their funding cut? Or I guess I'm trying to understand like the scope of this, like how many positions would not get stipended?
Again, there hasn't been like an official proposal. This stipends testimony comes before that, so I do not know which positions specifically.
Okay, that's fine then. I wanted to get my 2 cents in there. I do agree with Mariam, and like I've seen this process through and through, and I still believe that spreading out that money is more equitable, I think, when it comes to this process, because it is necessary to have a student government that is representative of the population. And although it's not enough, I know that it's not enough, it does help. So
Thank you. Christopher Williams. You recognize
Yeah,
him?
I just want to echo something like echoing what Pallavi said and what Director Khan said. I don't know if it is lost on some of the individuals in this committee, but it seems like it is what they're saying. So I want to reiterate it in the strongest sense that I can. By simply saying we're so married to this code, this constitution and all of that stuff. And I get it, it is the framework, and it should be used as important. But I think sometimes you need to recognize that this document that has been created, and these documents that have been created are not always fair and equitable. And I think this is the point that is being made here, which I full-heartedly agree with. Andrew, I heard you, Andrew Forbes, I heard you quote, the code has put in place something that is allowed for a fair distribution or whatnot. Eh, I would push back on that in saying that, one, you got to look at who wrote the code, um, who's in these conversations, and who does all of this stuff. And a lot of the times I would bet quite a bit of money that it's not a representative body. I would bet quite a bit of money that it's not a representative body that sort of writes this information on behalf of students. And because of this, it, I don't think it's intentional, but it causes barriers of entry to be put up when you're trying to get people involved in student government, when you're trying to get people involved in really anything of this matter. I mean, I hate to um, I hate to make it seem like some individuals on this call are tone deaf to everything that's going on in the world. I mean, we can look at things that are happening with Harvard and the other Ivies and sister institutions of UNC Chapel Hill. I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging, and how this plays in something that may be as simple or not as simple as an O&A hearing in which we're talking about how to stipend someone. I think that it is very important that we are keeping in mind how do we limit barriers to entry. And this is one way to do it. And if you cannot accept that, if you can't be willing to move away from, and maybe even accept that this document or these documents that we use aren't always the most equitable, if you can't accept that, then you're already doing a disservice to the student body at large at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I don't think anyone on this call wants to do that. So I just want to just bring that up. Just so that you can think about it and chew on it. And more so that the ONA chair and those on this committee can sort of think about it and chew on it. This is a barrier to entry question here. I do not come from, I do come from an affluent family. I don't have some of the struggles that others have. I don't need the stipend, but I do know that others might need it. Or it makes it that much better, and it breaks that barrier to entry. So I'm gonna say it like that, and be quiet for just a little bit longer, I guess.
Thank you so much. I would like just to point out that the pressure against Claudine Gay was because of her refusal to condemn anti-Semitism. Logan Gronsky, you are recognized. Just for the sake of time, everybody that wishes to speak tonight, please raise your hand and then I'll cut it off there. I just do have some homework to get done after this meeting.
Yeah, I really appreciate Christopher reframing how we're analyzing this, because there are two conversations happening here. One is that there's a concern that this criterion is unfair. This has been legislated. It can be re-legislated. And I think that if that is the perspective of people who are leaders in student government, let's have that conversation. Separately, we're having a conversation, and leaders in the student government have been called before the ONA committee to inform them on how, against that objective criterion, we rate. So I think that's clear. I also want to be clear, and as someone who has spoken with the finance committee chair, the O&A committee chair, that no decisions, certainly not, there's no decisions have been made about this. Like this is an open question. There have been attempts at analysis, incomplete ones, but neither I nor anyone else has, certainly not, as far as I know, Max, made any attempt to like formally decide this. So let's not fight against wind here. First of all. Second of all, when the time comes, we as leaders are going to be making trade-offs. And I am sure that there will be people who would like one thing to be different for another, someone to be paid more, this or that. And when that time comes, my challenge will be, okay, who specifically on the bill would you like to have, who do you believe should be paid less so that someone else can be paid more, etc. And that's how we're going to have that conversation. We can't speak in abstracts about this. We have to speak in the reality of a strict $47,000 budget for next year. That's that. But yeah, Christopher, you're entirely right. The code is to be followed, but it is not infallible. It is a document which is meant to be amended. That's why we have a Senate. I don't think I would not advise that we do that for this cycle. But when the time comes, and we also have, the transitional council, which some people here are members of, also has the ability, is going to be responsible for writing the next version of that. So let's keep the big picture in context. But also keep the small picture in context. Remember that there's a mandate here to evaluate based on an objective criterion. This is how the Senate appropriates funding, and we should go from there. And I think let's not become too heated about this.
Thank you, Treasurer Gronsky. Our last speaker of the stipend review testimony period will be Speaker Gary.
I do love getting the last words. It's always a fun position to have. I originally didn't want to speak more than once, frankly, because I have other things to do tonight. Don't want to be here too much longer. But there's been some ideas brought up in discussion that I felt worth revisiting. And I want to just sort of issue a warning. When stipends come up, they get heated. We're talking about real money here. I have very much appreciated having the extra $4,200 to spend this year. I probably would not have been able to afford this university had I did not have this funds to spend. But I want us to be careful of assuming that individuals here have negative intentions. I have seen stipends discussions for 3 years now where there is this assumption that like the executive branch deserves stipends and that senators don't, for example. And like that tends to lead to some tension between the branches, which is why stipends haven't been touched for years. Because there were some a few years ago who didn't believe that senators did enough work or deserved a stipend. When I know for a fact that the finance committee chair does more work than a lot of people. And like they do, in my opinion, deserve a stipend. I have seen people think that the honor system that certain positions in the honor system don't deserve a stipend because they aren't at the level to where they deserve it or something. And that is a dangerous, that's not productive, right? Like it fosters tension where there doesn't need to be tension. There are going to be trade-offs here. Even if we had an unlimited, even if we spent the entire appropriations reserve of $1 million, however much it is, on stipends, we still would not be able to stipend everybody in student government. It's just not possible. So I do not want, what I don't want to see in this process, since this is the first time since the 99th Senate that stipends have been revised, is it devolve into bickering and infighting that results in nothing happening. Because frankly, the current status quo of stipends cannot be allowed to continue. The stipends are totally arbitrary, and there are many positions that deserve a stipend that don't receive one. And there are some positions that like maybe need to have their stipend rate revisited. And that's the conversation that we should have. It is important that student government remain as transparent and accessible as possible. As many, like some of y'all might remember, I have been on a crusade for like transparent student government. And I have faced much resistance in getting people to agree to the idea that maybe meetings should not be held in secret and decisions made by like a clandestine group of people that are like allergic to government oversight or like the accountability of the people. But there's also like these accusations need to be tempered right now. Like, let's wait and see what O&A committee proposes before we start getting overly aggressive. Maybe if O&A produces a bad bill, we can all join together in crusading against them. But let's wait and see what the stipends bill is first. My understanding of the process is that O&A and Finance Committee both will review the bill before the full Senate does. So there will be plenty of opportunity for input and discussion, of which I'm sure there is going to be plenty. So that is my word of caution. Before we get aggressive, let's see what their proposal is, and then we can be angry at each other. But let's have something to be angry about first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like a moment to respond to Logan Gronsky's comment in the chat by saying everybody should be mean to him. That is our agenda item for stipend review testimony. Due to the sake of time, we'll move on to a report from the undergraduate vice president on external appointments, of which there is a copy in the Senate drive, and I will put it in the chat, but I'd love to continue these conversations about stipends over the next few weeks. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Chair Pollack. I look forward to the crusade against you in your final months at UNC. I think that's a good way to spend it. So yeah, I'm pumped about that. Cool. So like Max said, there is a copy of this report in the Senate drive. I sent it to him yesterday. The general intention of this report is to provide updates to you all regarding external appointees. And I'm just going to read through the sort of like intro letter, and then I'd be happy to take any questions, but you guys have access to all of this. There's not anything that I'm going to say now that isn't reflected in this report, but I'm just going to read this real quick. Dear members of the Oversight and Advocacy Committee, the purpose of this report is to offer a review of the work being done by external appointees across campus on behalf of the executive branch of undergraduate student government. External appointees are representatives of undergraduate student government and represent USG in a variety of policy and programming initiatives. Unlike other positions in USG, external appointees typically work in a very specific capacity in one policy area. Their responsibilities and duties are usually delineated in a charge offered either by student government documents or some other university code, i.e. faculty governance policies. These appointees do not usually work on programming or events. The aim of these representatives is to review policy work being done across campus and to offer student perspective. In my work in student government, I have often found that it is these conversations that will have the most direct impact on student experience at UNC. Many of the policies that dictate our time as students are crafted away from the classroom and far away from student spaces. For students, the ones who will feel the hand of these policies most heavily, being involved in practical decisions is of the utmost importance. Having students in these roles who are invested and aware of the larger university ecosystem is also invaluable. Student government produces students who are engaged and who understand the complexities of this campus. Deploying those students into these roles is the best way to get student expertise into the room. With this in mind, many of this year's EAs return to their roles for a second term. I urge the next Director of External Appointments to consider the knowledge held by many of these students while being mindful of the necessity of recruiting underclass students to start learning early. Some of these boards/committees focus less on policy and more on administrative work. There are, for example, several committees that consider proposals put forward by the general student body, faculty, or staff. Students serve on boards that accept or reject petitions to add new courses to the College of Arts and Sciences, on committees that accept or reject proposals to build on campus, on committees that determine the scope of priority registration, etc. Many of these groups will only meet once a month, and student representatives must be diligent and engaged to make their work significant. I have found this year, and in my previous capacity as Chief of Staff to the undergraduate vice president, that maintaining contacts and improving institutional knowledge is imperative and difficult. Like students, administrators regularly rotate in and out of positions and regularly do not know who they should interface with. I encourage whoever takes on this role next year to prioritize filling a few critical external appointments early in the academic year and to make themselves available to as many administrators as possible. Sending a few rounds of cold emails in August 2024 is surely the best way to increase administrative awareness of the pool of students ready to advise and improve on UNC's policies. Below is a list of policy highlights from a few EAs, a combined list of current EAs, a brief description of these positions and their responsibilities, a few outstanding vacancies, and a list of recommendations and priorities for the 2024-2025 undergraduate student government administration. I'm just going to jump to the very end. This is under conclusions. And these are just some, I guess, honest thoughts on this process. I did not have a complete report to refer to for last year, so I'm happy to provide any more information that the committee would like to hear. Happy to provide any of that. Happy to provide more insight into sort of the process and the decisions that went into all of this. But these are sort of some final thoughts that I have. The external appointment process is challenging because many of these boards and committees rely on faculty members for their coordination and implementation. The most important responsibility of the undergraduate VP is to connect excited students to the teams that need them and are ready to receive them. In the process of appointing many of these individuals, my team first had to identify who was running these committees, if anyone, and then explain the appointment process. My understanding is that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these processes were fairly streamlined. I want to be honest in my reflection and in this conclusion and show that these processes have not been returned to their pre-2020 status. I'd hoped to accomplish that in my time as VP and believe my team and I have made significant strides in this aim, but the work is not finished. As is always the case in student government, there remains much to be done on this front. I hope to be a resource to whoever tackles this task next and appreciate the diligence of this committee in ensuring the job gets done. Cool. And then the other content of this report is a list of current external appointees. So you can scroll through those. A few of these have sort of a clarification and identification of what these various committees and boards do. Some of these positions are multi-year terms. So some students are appointed to them and are expected to serve for 2 years. There are some positions who are expected to serve for the entirety of their time at Carolina. So it's like a lifetime appointment. I've included those down at the bottom, just so you all know who all executive branches appointings. That includes our vice chairs of the honor court, some judges to the Supreme Court, so a few of those folks. And then kind of the last thing I have for you all are just some general recommendations that I hope that I can accomplish. I have 2 more months in this position. And if I can't accomplish them, being realistic, that I hope that the next vice president of undergraduate student government is able to accomplish. So with that, I will open the floor to any questions, comments, or concerns. And again, if there's anything that's missing in this, happy to provide it at the next O&A meeting or before then.
Thank you, Becca. I'm gonna open the floor to anybody on the Zoom, regardless if you're a member of O&A or not, if you have any questions for Vice President Siegel.
Becca, is this a complete list of every single external appointment?
Yeah, so I made a note of that. There are a few that appear in the, I should have said that. Thank you, Samuel. There are a few positions that are listed in the undergraduate code that are no longer functioning. So a good example of that is the Student Academic Advisory Board. The intention of this board was by President Everett. The intention of this board, my understanding was to work with academic advising to, I guess, get like student input on how the advising process works. I have reached out several times to the dean of advising, to no avail, in complete honesty. And so like that is one that is as of right now defunct. I think there was also like a summer reading list book committee that has since been removed from the code. I could be wrong. I need the document in front of me. So that is not reflected. I know where there are vacancies, those names are not on that full chart. And when there are ongoing sort of like efforts to fill positions, that is not reflected on those charts. So there's a list of at least 3 there. One that's not there, and I'm just thinking about this because Sam, it's you and we've chatted about this, is the Campus Health Services Advisory Board. That is one where I am working with the faculty member who oversees that board to make sure there is student representation.
Becca, I love how you knew that that was completely a selfish question because I was thinking of that board.
I did.
So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so that's one of my recommendations too. And this is something that Speaker Gary and I have been chatting about, and something that I owe Speaker Gary actually, is an updated list of these external appointments. So a lot of these positions like need to be reviewed and removed from the code. And there are some like positions that also need to be codified and detailed a little bit more as well. So there are updates to the code that I'm hoping to do before April.
Any other questions? All right. If not, thank you so much for giving that report. It's very comprehensive. I'd encourage everybody to read it. I think there's some good things, especially in the recommendations section. Next on the agenda is the archivist report. Julie, you want to take that?
Hi, are you all able to hear me? Okay, cool. So the archivist report basically includes the annual report that you all know about. Everyone in the executive branch, all the EVO officers and cabinet directors, I've been bugging them for the past several months to get things. Oh, access is locked. Okay, I will give you all access and make sure that everyone can view that. Okay, you all should have access right now, but right now what you all are looking at is all of the Everett administration's goals and priorities, and how cabinet directors and executive board officers have been able to do that up until December. What my office is looking to do in the next week is to get an update on spring programming, so that we can also include that into the report. After we have included all of those, we are going to input that into Canva so that it can look a lot more pretty. In the past years of student government, the secretary has not been able to share this with the student body in an accessible form. So we're hoping that we can maybe get this published on like our website, or have it in our bio on our link tree on the executive branch Instagram. But yeah, if you go through the Google Doc, it has like our priorities, which were set by President Everett when he ran his campaign. And then we have each office, starting off with the Office of the Chief of Staff, and their reports and their goals and their backgrounds. So you'll pretty much see the same structure throughout the whole report. But again, the Office of the Secretary is open to adding any sections that the Senate thinks should be added. And then lastly, this report is only a small section of what the entire report will look like. We'll also be receiving a report from the Undergraduate Senate as well as the Honor Court, and then we will be combining this into one report by the end of term. And does anyone have any questions?
All right, seeing no questions, thank you so much for that report. I'd like to share that I also emailed the Speaker Pro Tem and the Chief Legal Officer, or the Chief Undergraduate Legal Officer. Got back a response from the legislative branch that they are working towards that. Did not receive a response from the Speaker Pro Tem, but I fully plan to bring that up the next time I see him. All right, but yes, thank you again for spending all this time in this meeting to present that. Since we are without a quorum, I only see 3 members now of ONA. The legislation is postponed. And next is possible election oversight options. If anybody on ONA has any ideas about this, or I can kind of talk about the ideas that I've had in the past week. All right. Just because of the chaos of the past week coming from the Board of Elections, I think we as the Oversight and Advocacy Committee should, I don't know if hold a hearing, but just kind of use our oversight powers and kind of start those discussions just to make sure this election goes smoothly. Just based off of how controversial it's already been, there's already been two student Supreme Court cases relating to this election, as well as several articles in the Daily Tar Heel, including the fact that one of the student body president candidates was refused ballot access until yesterday. And I'd love to start having these conversations with members of ONA and the greater student government about kind of a good way forward on election oversight and just ensuring that this election runs smoothly and we don't have any contention on election day or in the couple of weeks following it. Notices and announcements. Since we can't do anything about legislation, that'll be pushed to next meeting. I do believe, yeah, early voting does start soon. I don't know if it's tomorrow or Friday. But I think you might be right that it is tomorrow. Yeah, so I'll work with the speaker and the senators who introduced the legislation on the best way to move forward on those after the meeting. Otherwise, if nobody has any more business, this committee stands adjourned at 8:46. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.